Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for being here, face-to-face or on streaming. My name is Diego Mas Trelles. I'm the co-director of the festival of the 6th edition. We are collaborating once again with Espacio Fundación Telefónica. Thank you once again, and also thank you to other sponsors who have made this gathering possible. Among them, I will mention them: Casa Sefarad, Casa America, the Embassy of Sweden, Embassy of the Netherlands, and the Foundation Casa de Mexico, and the Autónoma University of Mexico in Madrid. The films are being screened until Sunday, the national, international competition, and different venues, and the winners of the international competition and the national competition will be screened on Sunday at the Círculo de Bellas Artes. So you can see this on the brochure, and hopefully you'll be able to see the film. I will now give the floor to Elena Manrique, who is director, producer, and member of the programming committee of the festival. Thank you very much for being here. Every year, we like organizing this gathering. I will now introduce our speakers. It is very important to show what we're doing at the festival, showing what female filmmakers, and also promoting female technicians and creators, so they take that leap, because we've realized that us women sometimes are fearful, and we have the imposter syndrome. So we think it is very interesting to have our guests explain how they have arrived here and what they're working on. We'll be talking about different topics. Next to me we have Ana Endara. She's from Panama. She's made incredible documentaries. Majesty, for instance, I'm a great fan. She is also screening For Your Peace of Mind, Make Your Own Museum. I encourage you to watch it. It's also a great documentary that shows what it is to be like an elderly woman. It seems that when you reach this age, you don't have a life, and this is a great way of showing the life of an elderly woman. We also have Ma'ayan Rypp. She's a filmmaker from Israel. The Other Widow will be screened tomorrow at 7 p.m. I encourage you to watch it. It is a special film, very intimate. They made it during COVID, and maybe for that reason it was easier for them to make it. We also have Eva Beling. I hope I pronounced this properly. A great documentary, Prejudice and Pride. You probably remember Jane Austen's work. It is a queer response on the history of queer films. It is mainly based on Swedish films, but not only. She's also made other documentaries, TV programs, The Men in Bergman, The Women and Bergman. Next to her we have Sia Hermanides. She's from the Netherlands. She will be presenting, well, I really want to see Ninja Nanny, her series. Do you feel like watching this? Well, I'd love to watch it. I haven't done so yet, but I will. I have seen her film, White Berry. We screened it yesterday, so I don't know if you will have the opportunity to watch it, but with filming, you know, this platform is a collaborator, so at some point you will be able to watch these films on filming. And finally, we have Tatiana Huezo. We've screened some of her films during the festival. She's from Mexico and El Salvador. She's made films such as Tempestad, La Noche de Fuego, and she'll be screening today The Echo at 9:30. To all of them, welcome. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I'm going to open up two lines of reflection. On the one hand, could you tell us, we're also on streaming, and this will be on the webpage of Fundación Telefónica forever. So when you're older, you can show your grandchildren, look, this is what we were doing in 2023. This is what I said during this gathering. Apart from your personal experience, I always ask myself the following. Our background, our culture, because you're all very diverse, Mexico, Salvador, Netherlands, Sweden, Spain, different origins. If by being a woman, this is a reflection that I'm sharing, does it have the same weight than your origins, your cultural background, your education, your place of birth? So apart from sharing your personal experience, could you please reflect on this matter, if possible? This is going to be a conversation. We have interpreters, speak the language of your choice, and then we will have a Q&A with the audience. So let's start with Ana. How did you get here? Well, asking questions. Taking into account the size of the industry in my country, I cannot live off the cinema that I make. This entails an additional effort for me. And I think this has to do with asking questions to myself, and also thanks to collaborations. This is another reason for which I make films, because I like creating with collaborations. And through these two aspects, I would say this was the seed of work to the next one. And then I ask a question, it is unresolved, no answer, and I open up a collaboration, and I continue experimenting, and I move on to the next project. So that would be my answer. Great. Do you think that this reflection, by being a woman, do you think that your film projects have sort of more influence from this, or is it your education, your background, your nationality? Well, I think that maybe the questions that I make in my films would not be posed by a man. For instance, in Majesty, there is a question with regard to cultural phenomenon within the country, this dream that is given to us. We want to become queens as children, and this is a question that a man would not pose, I think. I don't think so. Or for our peace of mind, right? Being an elderly woman in a rural setting, in a small village away from large cities in Panama, I think that being a woman is within that gaze, right? Ma'ayan, can you tell us a little more?
Yeah, how did you start making films? What was your background, your thoughts as a little girl? Bueno, whatever, everything you think is interesting.
Well, the thing with me is that I fall in love very easily. So I really wanted to be to do something in fashion when I was younger. I like to draw and fabrics and stuff. And I went to New York to study in the best fashion school, but art directing, to see it from the side. And then I fell in love with art directing. And when I went back to Israel, I went to study in the university film to be an art director. And through my studies, I had to experience directing, and then I fell in love with directing. So since then, I'm a director, or that's what I want to do. I didn't grow up watching all the biggest films. I think film was something that just had all the things that I loved doing in it. I loved photography, I loved storytelling, I love working with my hands. I grew up in a theater. My father is a theater director, so it's like something that had all my passions in it, and through working in it, I fell in love with films as well. And as a woman, I don't know, I think it's one more thing that defines me, being a woman. And I always, in my films, try to look for something that is maybe a taboo, or something that doesn't quite work well in society, or isn't handled very well. Like The Other Widow is about a mistress that her lover dies and she goes to his shiva. It's like a 7-day ritual. When someone dies, you go to every day. And no one knows who she is, and she just keeps coming. And it's like poking a finger into her role in society. And my next film is also, in a way, doing that. So, yeah, a woman is just one more thing.
Okay, Eva, you come from a long tradition of studying films and talking about films. Your documentary about Bergman, which of course got Bergman, our only God, for some people. So tell us a little bit how you go, like how do you started to get interested in films, and also how do you go from Bergman to Pride and Prejudice?
Yes, I actually started in theater, and then I moved behind the scenes to television, and then from television into film. And started at commercial television, actually, and at that particular channel there was I was assigned to produce a film magazine. So that's where my film really my film interest started, I think, and interviewing people and directors and so on. And then I moved to Stockholm International Film Festival. I did festival TV, and then of course Bergman passed away, and the director there said, "Why don't you do a film or program about Ingmar Bergman? Okay, come up with something." And so I was curious about his actors. So I did first one program with the Bergman and the women, and then I did a program with Bergman and the men. And that was sort of continued into films because the host also that was interviewing those actors had done film magazine for 30-40 years in Sweden. So at that I came up with the idea to do a program about him. And then I just went through all his film magazines for when he had interviewed Bergman and all the famous big names in the international cinema. And then after that, I've started to do some commercials, and then I was approached actually approached for once that he, actually the head of press at this Swedish institute had seen my films, and he said, "You're such a good director. I love your films and your programs." And that was that. And then I met him again, and we started to speak about Bergman and his queer characters. And I was like, "What? Bergman? Queer characters? In what films?" And he continued to, and we talked about, and then he started to also tell me about the Swedish, like there was an entourage of queer people in the 1910s and 20s in Sweden. who actually sort of started the whole business in Sweden, film business. And like Maurice Stiller, he gathered all his talents or actors. I think he had all the big names in his productions at that time, but I have never heard about it. So I started to make some research, and of course then I sat there and I saw all those fantastic films, and I ordered them at the library. And I got a call. They got a call from the Swedish Institute, who is ordering all those films. I think there were like 10 a day. And so I think I saw like 150 films. And I was looking for queer characters, queer things, scenes, and so on. And all of a sudden I thought, I have a film here. This is a film. And I had actually pitched it to Swedish television, and they said, you can do TV special about this. But when I sat there at the library, I was so fascinated by those, all this material. So I said, I think I want to do a movie. And they go, ha! Because it's a lot expensive and lots of there's a huge difference between doing a TV program and a film. At that time, I didn't know that. So anyway, so I started, I pitched the idea to the Swedish Film Institute. I got no thank you first, and then I got yes. So it took me a while actually to navigate and to learn where to find finances and so on. And I don't know if it had, maybe it took a little bit longer actually because I was a woman. I think so, because I had never done a movie, and who is she, you know, but then I did a pilot, and I actually took some films from the library. You're not allowed to do that, but I made a pilot of all the films that I've seen. And then I went back to the Swedish Film Institute and I said, hey, look at this material, and this is what I want to do. And they go, of course, now I understand what you are trying to do. So then it's sort of, I got financed and so on, I could do the movie. But it wasn't planned, you know. I wasn't like, I'm going to do a movie or I'm going to be a film director or so. It's just that it happened. You know, I just saw the material and I thought, this is a movie, so I have to do a movie. So, yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. So I could not do a TV special with these fantastic materials. There were, I think I have 73 film clips from. And also when I sat there, I realized that Sweden also had the. According to all the scholars that I interviewed, the first queer film in the world by Maurice Stiller from 1916. And he actually made two films, you know, one for the straight audience and one for the queer audience. And no one has even talked about that. So it was sort of, I found also the beginning of the film in the library when I sat there. So because they were talking about this German film, that was the first in the world, and I said, what about Maurice Stiller? You know, he should get credit for what he did. So, and it's also funny because that film was found in a flea market in Norway. So it shed new light on Stiller completely. And at that time in 1916 it was forbidden to be gay, or you know, it was against the law. So I think to make that film in that era, it must have been sensational for a queer person to sit in the cinema and see, you know, this love story between the painter and the artist and the trainee. So yeah. So and then I just continued to follow Stiller and the entourage there in the 1910s, he also was very fantastic, I think, because he saw something in Greta Garbo, for example, that she had a different charisma than the rest of the actors at that time. So he was, and then so I think he was a special eye.
Okay, for any of you that is interested, that you should all be interested, the film is screened today at 9 o'clock at Cineteca in Matadero. So you have a very good chance to see the film in a very good quality projection.
Bring a notebook.
Bring a notebook. Exactly.
Lots of films. Yeah.
Anyway, our next guest is from Netherlands. Her name is Sia Hermanides, Ninja Nanny director, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is your first feature film for cinema.
Whiteberry.
Yes, Whiteberry.
Yes. Yeah,
Whiteberry, sorry, Ninja Baby is a series that I'm dying to see. Ninja Nanny.
Yeah.
And Whiteberry is her first feature films for cinemas.
Yeah, for me it started actually with another series I did before. It was Soccer Girls, about a soccer team, a female soccer team. That was really my dream project. Like, it's your first big project, something you work for several years to make it. And actually, that was something that came from a dream I had when I was younger, and I was watching television, and I saw not so many girls actually in youth television, and if I saw girls, they didn't have the adventurous parts like boys did. So I really liked Pippi Longstocking, from Sweden. But that, I watched it over and over again. But then in the end, I knew, I was searching for new things. So that inspired me to make more, youth television with girls as the main, in the main role. And then I thought like 11 girls in a soccer team, and I was also a soccer girl myself. And that was another team, I'm not sure how it is in Spain, but in Holland it was really hard to play soccer. When you were a girl, you always had to play with the guys, or there were not, how do you say, they didn't take it really seriously if you like to play soccer. That was my passion project, for those two reasons. And that took me actually 5 years, from that I wrote the pilot, and I made a pilot until I got it on television. And that was, a long process, pitching it over and over again, until I found a producer who didn't watch at my track record because I didn't make anything yet. And everybody said, oh, this is a really good idea, and maybe you can do an internship and get coffee, and we take the idea. And sometimes I thought maybe I should do this because then there will be this, thing on television. But after 5 years, there was a producer who was I like it, just go do it, and that is very special. I still am very happy that I came to meet this producer. And then I made Soccer Girls. Actually, you can watch it on YouTube. So if
totally.
if you like to see it, and after Soccer Girls, that was a success in the Netherlands. And then I made Ninja Nanny, and that's about a girl who becomes a superhero. And it was also something when I was younger. I thought I miss girls who in superhero movies, and so that's Ninja Nanny, and I made 2 seasons of that. And then, in the meantime, I also worked on short films, and then Whiteberry came actually. And a lot of also actors from Soccer Girls and Ninja Nanny, you can see them in Whiteberry as well, in small parts, or and you said how does it influence me that I'm a woman?
Yeah, obviously we are all a product of where we are from, our gender,
Yeah.
our parents, you know, we are a mixture of everything, but sometimes it seems that something weighs more than the other. You know?
Yeah, for me it felt really urgent, like I miss this on television, these images, also a diversity of girls, that you don't constantly see the same type of girl. So that was also for me in Soccer Girls 11 very different characters, and I think everybody, also boys, can recognize themselves in them. Because that was one thing I came across very often with Soccer Girls. They said the first question was, why would boys want to watch this? And I thought it was interesting, because normally people don't ask why would girls want to watch it. And then I had to write an extra soccer team in it with boys, and first it had a big part, but then when we shot I made it smaller. But actually the biggest compliment I got was that a man of like in 40, he was in his 40s, and he said, I really recognize myself in Selma, one of the girls, and I really like that, because I think it's important that also men can identify with female characters. That's a big thing that has to change, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because that's something that I'm going to go back to that.
Okay.
Tatiana Huezo from Salvador, but all her career has done... Bueno, your first film you did it in El Salvador.
In Spanish, please.
Ah, perdona.
Tatiana is from El Salvador, but she has studied and worked in Mexico. I think her first film, El Lugar Más Pequeño, she shot it with her family in El Salvador. She has different films. We've screened some of them, very powerful titles such as Tempestad, Storm. I think that this documentary should be screened in schools everywhere. It is a very difficult reality, but I think it should be shared. Noche de Fuego, also impressive. And for your last documentary, The Echo, you work with indigenous people, people who have a specific social reality. I think that it is very interesting that with The Echo, we have the feeling of, well, hope and joy after seeing so much violence and darkness. Tatiana, how did you get here to this gathering? Well, it is a long road. I think that I fell in love with movies in movie theater in the National Film Theater. I was 10. My mother raised me and my sister, both of us, single mother. She worked at a telecom company in Mexico, and she loved going to the Film Academy theater once a year. So it was very special for her. It was the same as going 10 times to the cinema, but every year she took us with her. Maybe, well, we were watching films that we shouldn't have watched because they were quite difficult, strong. Niño Salvaje, Cabeza Borradora, Paris, Texas, also Blue Velvet. I became an addict of David Lynch. And I think that this was a strong feeling. I experienced many emotions. I was in the shoes of other people, other creatures in this window towards dreams. And I said, I wanted to have these same powers. I wanted to be the one making these films. And since I was very young, I wanted to tell stories. And I started writing some theater. And then I went to film school. I started when I was 17 in CCC in Mexico. I was there for 8 years. I wanted to become a photographer. I was studying for that more than 20 years ago. There were no female photographers in Mexico. There was only one in those days. And she didn't even finish school, and then she went to live in the US where she could continue her career. But it was very difficult to photograph what my colleagues were doing, so I started directing to be able to photograph my own projects, and I also made photographs of my colleagues' projects, but I wanted to do this for boys and girls, not only for girls or female filmmakers from my generation. It was difficult to grow. I quit for some time. I started editing. This became a job that I could that allowed me to earn enough money. I don't really love it, but I worked in editing. Now I love it. I'm fascinated by it. I'm always editing my own films with another close colleague. She's edited all my projects. But this is how my journey started. I started making films, documentary. My first important experience was before finishing my studies. I made documentary on a bigam family, 2 women who fall in love with the same man and who live together. I went there to try to understand their story. I also fell in love with being there, with being part of other people's lives. And I think that that experience was the seed of what occurred afterwards. And in Mexico it was difficult. I needed more documentaries, more films, more knowledge, and there's a documentary course in the film school in Mexico. It lasts for 1 year, and I saw in Construcción this film a few years ago, and that film was a revelation, and I saw that it had been made by students at Pompeu Fabra University, and I went to this university, and with me I was already carrying El Lugar Más Pequeño, this other project. It grew. Grew during this master's. I discovered cinema of Victor Kosakowski, Van der Keyk, and others, de Garda. Many filmmakers. Now Naomi Karwase was like a punch in the guts. And all of this feeds into my gaze, and this is how the first film was born. I went back to El Salvador. I didn't grow up in El Salvador. I was born there. My father is from El Salvador. I moved to Mexico when I was 4, and I lived in the countryside. As a child, I was raised among cows, and female caretaker was there. She raised us because my mother was working, but there's also another small seed in that part of my life. I think that childhood makes us who we are. And your childhood will accompany you all your life. And I think that the rural setting was very important. on this journey. My first encounter with the rural setting was very powerful, and then I went back to El Salvador because I wanted to understand the other side of things, the other side of my identity that felt far away, and a war that I didn't experience. It was experienced by my family in the 80s. It ruined many villages, among them the village where one of my grandmothers was born, and I went back to this village to shoot El Lugar Más Pequeño, and then I needed about 4 years to be able to gather the money. It was a success, fortunately, and my next projects were easier. It was easier for me to get funding and to make these films, up to The Echo, who will be screened tonight at 9.
Bueno, hay una cuestión.
Well, there's something that has been pointed out by Sia, I believe, and because oftentimes it's harder to be ignored than to be marginalized or discriminated. And when we look at who is reading the books written by women and who is watching the films made by women and who attends the exhibitions made by women, when we think about bestsellers, this is really incredible. Very few men read novels written by women. When we talk about essays, that might be somewhat different. And we see that the trend is changing. We are running a festival of cinemas, of movies made by women, but this is not for women, this is for everyone. And what we find very difficult is to bring the women's creations outside the ghetto made by women. This is why I loved what she had said about this series about soccer. We always feel connected with the big characters in the stories, with big men, and it's very hard to find a young boy or an elderly man to feel connected or related to a woman or
tuviéramos esta reflexión un poco entre todas nosotras.
Or a housewife. So I would like to reflect with you. What do you think we have to do in order for our job to be more visible, in order for you to give the right value to your job, and so that we do not have to keep on insisting on people and having men being more inclined to follow our work? I know this is a tough question. If I had the single answer, it would be wonderful, of course, but maybe we can put our heads together to reflect on this. Maybe we can come up with solutions. I will say something that is maybe somewhat obvious, but maybe it's all about availability for having these works to be exhibited, to be shown. So there is maybe an issue with the access to this type of work, and I believe that this is important too. I do not claim for it to be the single issue or the single reason behind this, but I'm sure that accessibility is an important factor to have a fair access to this work, to be taken into account by the platforms. I think it could be helpful. I believe this is quite obvious, but I suppose that we all produce work for it to be seen by everyone. We're not targeting, I don't know, a tall person with this type of hair or whatever. We want to have an open audience. What do you think, Ma'ayan?
We're fighting years of conceptions that have been built on how cinema is made, what is the gaze, who do we approach, and viewers have been become used to watching a certain type of cinema, and I think now it's changing, and people are from themselves they want to be exposed to different kind of cinema, and that's maybe our role to bring it. But I also think it starts earlier when you go you know, to get money to make a film, you have to stand in front of a committee. In my case, it was always mostly male, and to come in front of all these men, also with my short film, and to explain what it is, what it feels like to be a mistress, or in my previous film to feel captive. It's always like in my films, it's always a very feminine subjects, and it's either the guy, you know, understands it or they don't. I assume if it were a woman, it would probably speak to her more because we have certain things in common. So I think the way to change it is first in the committees that give the money and that sit in the boards of, you know, the foundations and the TVs, and then you can expose and hopefully people will just be more open-minded. I feel that there is a change already.
Yeah, I think so. We had a very, sorry that I make a parenthesis, but we had a very inspiring conversation with Anna Senner, the director of the Swedish Film Institute, that she came into this festival, I think it was the second year, wasn't it, Diego? The second year. And I mean, I really think this conference that she gave should be compulsory in all the cinema schools. Because I'm not going to be able to summarize the things that she said, but basically what she was saying is because we were talking about the need of having female quotas to have, like, not only in cinema, in everything. And one of the things that came in the conversation was there has always been male quotas. I pay the same taxes than a man, the same taxes. Pago los mismos impuestos. ¿Por qué revierte?
So why do these taxes go more to men than to women's work?
That for us somehow is like the, you know, the paradise of equalitarianism, you know, compared to other parts of the world, it's a little bit more advanced. Do you think there is still a long way to go?
But I think Anna Senner really made a difference, and also. When I was living in New York for a couple of years, and I was a member of New York Women in Film. So when I moved back to Sweden, I was looking for a network, and you know, who should I, you know, team up with? And there was no network. So I sort of, I called a producer, a woman, first producer woman in Sweden that I worked with a couple of years earlier, and I said, where are all the people? Where are you? And she said, we're starting with Women in Film and Television Sweden. So come on. So and that organization has grown huge now. It's for being like just a couple of girls, we're like a huge network. And I think also my former president, I was co-president for WIFT. She actually became president for the WIFT in whole world. So, and Anna was a really great support for the organization also. But an interesting thing is that when I was pitched this idea, Prejudice and Pride, the person who pitched it to me had pitched it to several boys, and they all said no. So that says something also, I think, what women wants to do, you know, what project we chose to do. So of course he was really glad that someone, I was like, wow, this is a great idea. But that was probably 3-4 years later, you know. So that's interesting also, I think, that as a woman you chose a little bit different stories, I think, and that's important, because if we do not make films, you know, these stories are not going to be told, I think.
Yo quería añadir, en ese sentido,
I would like to add in that sense. And going back to your question, I don't know if you make movies for everyone, or maybe this is my case, but I don't know how to put this. You're not going exactly to a niche target, but there are people in my movies that people in the audience that see themselves in my movies. So maybe my movies resonate more with certain people, and I think that's good. Also, in the case of Para Su Tranquilidad, in that movie, nobody was below 70 years old. And if that doesn't really appeal a 40-year-old man, that's okay, I would say. I'm not talking about it from the viewpoint of excluding people, but from the viewpoint of also having other audiences with whom these characters resonate.
Actually, two things. Like, I hear a lot about the commissions being a male and not female, but I think that's not the biggest issue, because I think also female, commissioners choose earlier, like they can also connect with stories about boys, because they see that a lot. Actually, in my film class, and me myself, when I started filmmaking, I also wrote films about boys as the main lead. So I think it has to do with the narratives, like the narratives we are used to. And actually it starts already in childhood. Like you also say, like people are being really formed in their childhood. And I have actually now a son myself from 1 year old. And now I notice, like all the stories I read, that a lot of boys are in the main role. And I think we have to start with children books, like and children series as well, and films. But I think the books is the first thing, and the stories you tell to your children. They make such a big impact on your life, and also for male and female. Like if we change that, and I really do my best now with my son, but it's very hard to find good books. Also with gender, like you normally see, all the women are are always at home and cooking, and the man is not really there. So I think we need to change. So that was one of my things that I think. Actually, we all should start write children books now.
10 years ago, there was a very good festival of films for children that were outside the commercial, It was not Disney films. Not that there is nothing wrong with Disney films, but we already have too many of those. And it was like from all over the world. And luckily, the lockdown and the COVID finished with a lot of initiatives. But I think it's very good that we start from the beginning to show other ways of behaving, other ways like what we have, been receiving from the past, not just in gender matters, but also with a lot of other things. It's very important. You are right. Yeah. Tatiana.
No, me gusta mucho lo que.
I like very much what you have said. I also have a daughter myself, and I believe that the big problem of this patriarchy that we live in comes from the way we educate our children and the way we bring up the children. I believe it is the most important topic that goes beyond the borders of movies or books or anything. I think we need to deconstruct that maze that we have been going through for so many generations, and this we have carried it for many years, and consciously as well as consciously. And I think that I have thought very consciously about the books that I nurture my daughter with, and the way I tell her about love. Girls do not need to fall in love with a boy necessarily. We are human beings. Love is a big thing. So I believe that children can be raised with a better view of everything around them, and I think that education is the seed of everything. Regarding the quotas, the shares that you were talking about earlier, I think that before the commissions, before the committees, we have schools and we have education. At least in Mexico, until 5 years ago, most of generations of the film students were men. And so 90% of the people requesting funds were men. So even if you had juries, well, clearly juries were also made up by men, but of course, if most of the directors and most of the stories came from men, and they were good stories, but if the majority of these stories came from men, it was very difficult to see stories coming from women. This started changing a few years ago, and about 5 years ago, more or less, schools, film schools, I don't know if they have a quota share, but we started seeing that the committees were made of 50% men and 50% women. And this, we have seen a big change, and in the past 5 years we've seen an explosion of new movies coming from women. It has been a hard work to get to this point. Women have been working very hard over the years. Many movie makers, editors, directors of photography, writers, there are still not enough women in the industry. It's not leveled, but we have seen a greater number of women professionals in the industry. But if women do not have access to the film schools, they won't have access to the funding either. Well, I want to ask you the last question. Then we will move on to the Q&A from the audience. I don't know if you know this intellectual, French intellectual Bernard Pivot, who had a cinema program that had only men guests. But I want to turn this around, and I would like to ask you, what would be your advice for a woman who's starting in the industry and who wants to make movies or documentaries, or who wants to become a director of photography? What would be your advice that could be useful, and that would be different from the advice you would give a young boy? Maybe you wouldn't give them any different advice from that you would give a boy, but what would you say would be your best advice for a woman?
I think that it's really important to learn technique.
To what?
Technique as a woman, because like technique, like editing, and go into all those new technologies, and not to be afraid of that. That's a boy's field, kind of. So I think that's an advice I would give to young film directors or producers or whatever. If I were young today, I would go to learn all the techniques, because when you have that, it's really easy to make a film. If you can direct, you can edit, you can produce, you can do all this and get in the front, sort of. of course, stories, but that we have.
That we have.
but yeah, because I think many women are afraid of technique. You know, they go, "Oh, I can't do that," and then you get a little bit behind, I think. So it's a lot of things happening there.
Okay.
Mm?
No. I've never thought about that, but yeah, maybe you're right. It's like we have a lot to say, you know, a lot to tell. It's true what they say that girls start speaking before than boys. Somehow we are more articulated when we are little, and then little by little our voice doesn't seem to be equally loud. But yeah, technique, yeah, that's interesting. Less and less it's happening, but yeah, but it's true that sometimes we feel a little bit scared.
Photography also, you know, it's technique, it's camera, but it's a great thing to know, and to be holding a camera and you know, focus, everything that you can create.
Actually, I always technique is not my strongest part, but then my advice is I always have. You know, you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and if you know yourself really good, then you can create a super team. So, me personally, I wouldn't advise that, but I would advise to know yourself and how do you say, make your weak spots, search the right persons for that. But I can understand it works for, maybe or for a lot of people. I was thinking it's a good question. I was like you asked, and I would say it sounds like a cliche, but it's still. I think if you really want to make it in film, you really have to believe in yourself and let nobody like talk you down, or and you have to accept that you can fail, but you have to keep on going. Like I have a good example. I had in one series a scene was erased. Like it was a whole shooting day. It was very expensive, but it didn't work in the edit. And there was also a very famous Dutch director. He shot 2 weeks of material, and they skipped it in the film. They erased it. And with him, they said like, "Oh, he's a genius. You know, he know what he wants. He's a genius, and he just skipped this material, and still this film is good." And with me, it was the first thing the producer said, like, "Oh, you didn't know what you want. You skipped this scene, and it was very expensive." And then I said, "Yeah, film is always." In the process, you sometimes have to kill your darlings or just kill very expensive scenes. And they really tried to get me down, but I kept on thinking like, no, this is part of the process, and I'm still a good director. So, just keep, how do you say? And don't let them patronize you. Yeah.
Ma'ayan?
I don't know. What would be a different advice, because I think making a film is takes so much. I mean, such a journey, and I think my advice would be probably similar. You have to be very true to yourself all the time, and always be, it's a bit like what you said. It's a bit like asking a question. So maybe a film is about asking a big question, but you always have to ask yourself, is this right? Does this feel right? Is this my character's truth? Do I relate to this? And then you it's like an intuition that you always have to follow, and you have to listen to it. And if you move a bit, then it shows. And so I think it's always to it's a cliche, but to follow your truth and to go with it, and to be very blind to everything around, because I think if I would wake up, and to be optimistic, because I think if I would wake up even one morning with a doubt that this film might not happen, it wouldn't have happened. You have to every morning know this is what you want to make, and you have to keep on do it and go with it and blindlessly until you die, even if it doesn't happen. You know, but sometimes the dream is better than what comes out, maybe. So you just have to continue with it always.
Okay. Tatiana, pues un consejo.
Well, I would give the advice I would give to a young woman who's starting her path in the industry is that I would say that they need to be very stubborn. They need to be very rigorous in what they do. I think that it's very important to identify this truth, as they were saying, the truth in the essence of your desires, of what you want to tell, of what you don't understand. Sometimes there lies the most interesting thing that we can tell in a story, and we need to be very stubborn and we need to be very critical with ourselves. This is what I mean by being rigorous, and we need to come out of the comfort zone in which sometimes we tend to stay, because this is the only way that we can find the strength in the things that we do. To add something different, I would like to reflect on this advice being different for a boy or a girl. I don't know if it would be, but I would say that you need to surround yourself with people that can support your work and that they can make it better. Movie making is a place where you find very tight hierarchies, and sometimes people who find a woman in the lead and might find it uncomfortable. And if you find people like that, just kick them out of your team if they don't feel comfortable with you being the leader. And you need to surround yourself of people who can collaborate with you and bring these people to your next project. These people who are ready to tell the same story that you want to tell. Maybe if you tell this to a woman, it's more important than telling it to a man, because men, maybe they're more used to, or people are more used to seeing men in the leading roles, and they are not questioned. And whereas when you're a woman and you have to lead a team, then you're challenged. And I think it's important to take this into account. Well, I would like to be way younger and have heard your advice at the beginning of my career, but we all know that in this journey, to make mistakes is just another part of it. If we all knew where we were heading for, we would be simply tourists. So we just know where we can start our journey, but we never know where the path is going to take us to. So it's time for the Q&A. I think we need a microphone.
Voy a ser breve.
I will be brief. As an amateur of cinema and going to Films by Women Festival, I wanted to thank you, because I think that in a certain way the artistic scenario and the movie scenario improves greatly with women filmmakers. And I wanted to reflect on the Islamic world, where women are hindered. How could we reach a Muslim audience, for instance, via festivals, events, etc.? Well, thank you very much that you're a follower. Thank you for being a follower of this festival. In the presentation that we have afterwards, we have a woman from Algeria who has made amazing documentaries. I don't think that I can talk on behalf of a culture that is not my own, and taking into account that she's going to be here at the next roundtable, it might be more powerful that she answers that question. Unless any one of you want to try to answer that question. So if you're really interested by that topic, you should maybe pose the question to this filmmaker during the next roundtable. In any case, we have many debates here in one. You have to realize that any project that is beyond mainstream, outside mainstream, it is very difficult to make it visible. You add additional layers. It is not mainstream. It is directed by a woman, and maybe this woman belongs to a cultural minority, and in this culture maybe movies are not easily watched. So you're adding layers of difficulty in this debate. And I'm a teacher at university, and I tell my students, do research, try to see different things. And I think that the audience also has to be eager to seek. We shouldn't all just read what we're told to read. The same with movies. I think that this is very rewarding if you go beyond, if you leave sort of the mainstream path. Well, my comment is a good segue. I'm an educator. It is the second time I come to this festival. I come from California. I'm a teacher. I've also taught at 4th, 5th grade at school. As educators, we have significant power when it comes to choosing what our students are going to read or watch. So if we can open more doors to be able to educate teachers so that they have better access to your works as female filmmakers, you're changing narratives within your cultures and countries instead of continuing with specific curriculum. Maybe we could open up this way of changing mainstream and the canon. This is where students can learn the most, I think.
Good idea. We will send you a link with all of our work. Yeah. Is that an idea? No. I know, but I'm only one person. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
No, o sea que hay más redes.
More networks of teachers.
How they teach, their pedagogy, and access to students. So I think connecting it somehow to the teaching world, right? Redes de profesores would be a great idea.
Yeah, but who's gonna do it? Like.
I know. Yeah. Is it Ministerio de Cultura? No, Ministerio de
Would this be the Ministry of Culture, of Education in the different countries, or the Cervantes Institute?
Maybe, I mean, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to take all.
Because it is very important. That I have to say that. Perdona, vos.
It is true that at the end of our chain, of any filmmaker's chain, we have the audience, right? And it is very difficult to make a film. You have to submit your project pitch your film on girl soccer players and widows, and once you've made the film, I always ask myself, how can we do things to be able to reach the largest audience? How can the film find its place? How do we promote this among younger generations, students at school? How can they have access to this material to change things also? Things change, but maybe they should change quicker, right? We shouldn't be waiting for the next generation. Yes, hello. Carlota Alvarez Basso. I'm the co-director of the festival. Sorry, I was at another event at the National Library with a documentary on Nani Vitale, and we were there with a presentation of this documentary on the Uruguayan poet. I wanted to make a comment. Exhibition is key. And festivals such as this one, not just because we're behind it, but I realize how relevant it is. Today we are preparing the speech for the closing ceremony, and we were reaching out to all the different venues to be able to have figures on the attendance. We had 8 full theaters, great news, and we asked filming for figures. And filming said 5,000 viewings, and this is great, this is excellent. But the most watched film is first film by a filmmaker from Mongolia. We watched it 6 months ago, The Code of Life, Cordón Umbilical in Spanish. It will be shown at the Film Archive. It's been the most viewed film on filming. And they've told us, we didn't know anything about it, congratulations, it's wonderful. And if we hadn't made the effort at the selection committee and as filmmakers in seeking for these films by female filmmakers, we would have never found this film by a Mongolian female filmmaker. We have an agreement with a festival in China, and they send us movies, and we've always shown Chinese filmmakers projects, and they told us about this film, they sent it to us, and you were talking about distribution platforms. Of course, if we don't have these festivals that accelerate the connection with the audience, it would be very difficult. I just wanted to share this information, and we were really surprised by this, that this film from Mongolia was the most watched. And to Elena, I just wanted to say that we're okay on time. We have about 20 minutes left, so we have time for more questions. Well, I have more questions, so not to worry. We have also realized in this work carried out during these years that things that are not named seem to not exist. And sometimes we watch these projects, films made by women, but if you say the most important filmmakers, the 10 most important ones, Scorsese, etc., and we ourselves forget mentioning pioneer women, female inspirations. This year we have Dorothy Pavenpolt, and we also have Guy Blaché. Which are your female filmmakers' favorite ones, the ones that have inspired you the most or interested you the most, names that you'd like to share with us? Agnes Barda. When I saw that she caught trucks with her camera, I thought that was amazing. It was mind-blowing. And then behind this project, this woman was there with her gray hair, and I thought it was incredible. Agnès Barda, with La Nouvelle Vague at the beginning, well, nobody paid attention to her. She had to open up her path. It wasn't easy for her. And as you were saying, persistence, little by little, effort after effort.
For me, it was Claire Denis when I watched. Well, I think every film she made. I think there is something about the way she makes films that is. The story is not necessarily the main thing in the film. It's more about, like when I watched the first times, maybe Ninette and Bonnie, or well, there's something about how her characters move and they have their like everyday life, and you just kind of like feel when you're in the cinema and you watch it that you're with them and you're experiencing another person, but not, you know, very different than the cinema that I grew up on, like the American, that it's all about the story and this leads you here and this leads you there. But there's something about just, you know, enjoying a character and feeling very close to her and feeling that you can relate to how she thinks or experiences. And so Claire Denis for me. But there's more. I will say more if you guys won't say that.
Well, I think that when I saw the piano, that was fantastic film. But I don't have any favorites. I think it's so great that actors or actresses goes from acting to directing, like Liv Ullmann and Judy Foster, and I think that's really a big step, you know, that these famous actresses and also playing certain roles, all of a sudden just go behind the camera and so. But do you have?
I have a lot.
Go for it. Go for it.
But I will stick to two very different directors. First of all, Catherine Bigelow. She made, of course, The Hurt Locker, really action movies, and I really like that she broke with the image of, female director can only direct. Well, in the Netherlands, you have female directors like me are always asked for romantic comedies, and I also really like to direct action movies. And I was really glad that I could direct Ninja Nanny because there's martial arts in it, and so Catherine Bigelow was for me to prove I can direct this. She can do it, I can do it. And a totally different director, Céline Sciamma, from France. That's actually maybe, she was the first who popped in because, I think she's incredible. Every film is different. She really dares to do new genres, like what is in English, on fire, the woman on fire.
Of a woman on fire. Sorry.
It's so nice.
A Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yeah, the portrait. I have the French title in my head. But also Girlhood was one of my favorite films and inspired me actually also for the process I did with my film White Berry. Like she worked with non-actors and did some really, I don't know if you've seen the film Girlhood, but you also have a scene with Rihanna in it. Like it suddenly is a video clip. So she also is in her style really daring and innovating. So I stick to those two, otherwise it will take like half an hour. Yeah.
Tatiana, maybe you have a Latin American director in the spot.
A mí me cuestan los apellidos.
Céline, petite man, woman on fire, Birgeau. She's Finnish. She has a difficult surname, Okasolo, something like that. Birgeau is a filmmaker, photographer. 3/3 of Melancholy, I think, is the name of her film. And she's always focused on childhood and adolescence. Lucrecia Martínez, Elena Ormel, incredible references. Carla Simón, of course. Many filmmakers, and many new young filmmakers that are also inspiring. I love that you've mentioned Catherine Bigelow, because I have a sentence here. I have here a sentence. This year, the #1 blockbuster from Barbie from Greta Gerwig. That's just an additional comment. There's a phrase. One is from Agnès Barda, and the other one, 3, Catherine Bigelow and Lucrecia Martel. I'm going to start with Agnès Barda.
Associate real things, nature, painting that we have seen, real things that we have seen as nature, painting, etc. Perdona, lo leo en inglés y luego lo traduzco. If we are able to associate real things like nature, paintings that we have seen, music that we have heard, a book that we have read, a film we saw with our own real life, our emotional life, it will mean something. Basically, that to contaminate your work with all your past experience, because sometimes it's more, and then it makes me go to Lucrecia, that says, lo voy a decir en español, ser director.
To be a filmmaker is to invent resources to see the world instead of using shapes to make a film. Using different forms to make a film. She wants to invent new ways of seeing the world instead of trying to tell the same story with different techniques. And finally, Catherine Bigelow, who says,
resistance to women making movies, I just choose to ignore it. For 2 reasons. I can't change my gender, and I refuse to stop making movies. Entonces, bueno, me parece que es un statement importante.
I think this is a very strong statement. I will translate this for the audience. Again, the culture that we can associate to real things, to nature, to films that we've watched, music that we've listened to, etc., have to be mixed with our real life, our emotional life, so that our work means something. I think this is great. And Catherine Bigelow, you have to realize that this phrase from Catherine is from 1995, when she made Stranger Things. It was a film that was not very feminine, with strong characters, with action, with these camera movements that were very sophisticated. We weren't really used to this. Technically, it was amazing. And in 1995, maybe nowadays you'd say something different. If there is a resistance towards women filmmakers, I would decide to ignore it for 2 reasons. I can't change my gender. I'm not going to stop making films. So I thought it was important to share these sentences. Do we have time for more? I think we have to close the round table. I would like to thank Ana from Panama, Ma'ayan from Israel, Eva from Sweden, Sia from Netherlands, and Tatiana from Mexico for sharing their experiences. Please go to the cinema, not only Madrid films by women, but also other films. Go to the cinema.